At the time where Congress was assaulted, I made the point that the Capitol putsch attempt, even though it might have been ridiculous, Trump trying to get people to do things that were basically illegal in the public and on Twitter, it sounded absurd, and yet, nevertheless, he was trying to overturn the election results, screaming that he won, not just won, but won in a landslide, despite the fact that all of my lawyers and all of the money that I'm spending on this couldn't necessarily find or manufacture the evidence that was necessary in order to show that to be true. Screaming it in a bullhorn, basically saying, I won this race, and telling 30, 40 million people that you won it, that you were the person who won it, and they're stealing it from you. They're stealing it from you. I've made the point that the concession speech is one of the most important aspects of our elections. You have two sides. Those two sides go to war in order to settle this notion or this problem of who leads and who's going to take the reins. And at the end of that process, they have this kind of gentleman's agreement in the entire way through. In fact, all of us on some level do. But this invisible agreement that if I win, I'm going to take the Black Panther formula and I'm going to go up there and be king. If you win, I'm going to go and tell my people that I lost, that I sucked, and that at the end of the day, we're all Americans or Wakandians or whatever the fuckians. And at the end of that process, we come together and we function as one. Meaning we may be pissed off at the political people and everything else, but there's a border around the extent to which we engage with one another. The catch is, it seems that that border is breaking down, and Donald Trump didn't necessarily abide by the typical rule set of losing. Now, you can make a case that said, well, look, they attacked him for 3 years straight, screaming about Russiagate, and that is entirely true. They tried to delegitimize his presidency from early on by screaming that Donald Trump was working with the Russians. Entirely true, entirely fair. But understand their attack was specific. Social media allowed the Russians to affect the minds of Americans to get them to not vote Clinton. This argument entirely spares the electoral system of the United States. It's because it's a hot button taboo issue, and it's not something they want to screw around with, because they understand, as we all should, that what's on the other side of that is chaos, anarchy. I know the left love these ideas of revolution, but what happens on day 2 of that revolution? And I got to be honest, I don't necessarily think it's going to be this kind of glorious thing that people think it is, at least not in the way that we are organized right now, and not in the way that we're at each other's throats right now. The reason I said it was a success was because it showed that it was possible to go and basically attack the Capitol and make it into the Capitol. This building that seemed untouchable and remote, as if it was on a cloud somewhere. We found that no, it was on Earth. It was in a physical location, and it was reachable by human beings with bad intentions that wanted to go in and put a noose around the neck of Mike Pence, or for that matter, get their hands on congressmen. It was a success because it made them human. It humanized Congress. It humanized that building. It made it look as if it was touchable in a way that I don't think it was seen as touchable before. That's why I think it was a success. Yes, they're going to try to get many of the people who are involved in it, but that's less relevant to the fact that it happened. Today, it was noted that there was a militia group that is talking about an attack on the Capitol. Now, this, again, is being done for Trump. And because the thought is that tomorrow was supposed to be the day that Donald Trump rides in on the golden horse and takes the presidency once again. And the thought is that the Capitol was going to be attacked in lieu of that, or because of it. Right here, this is Reuters. Because this escalates within a few minutes. The police force that guards the U.S. Capitol said on Wednesday it obtained intelligence pointing out that a possible plot by a militia group to breach the building on Thursday, an alleged plan with echoes of January 6. The U.S. Capitol Police statement, or a U.S. Capitol Police statement, did not name the organization but called it, quote, an identified militia group, unquote. Authorities have said right-wing extremists were part of a mob of supporters of former President Donald Trump that stormed the Capitol on January 6, interrupting formal congressional certification of President Joe Biden's election victory. Thursday marks the date that some right-wing conspiracy theorists have claimed that Donald Trump, defeated by Joe Biden in November 3rd election, will be sworn in for a second term in office. Not so much. This came out a few minutes later. The United States House of Representatives scraps Thursday's session on warnings of Capitol attack plot. The U.S. House of Representatives canceled a session scheduled for Thursday following a law enforcement warning of intelligence pointing to a possible plot of a militia group to breach the U.S. Capitol, the Washington Post reported on Wednesday. Look, the reason why I brought up that these guys thought they were on some level successful is because there's an aspect of our government. Legitimacy is not necessarily built entirely just on legitimacy. Meaning, even though it's a certain degree of an agreement, it's not just a gentleman's agreement. That notion of that individual that gets elected, there's a system around that person. And that system around that person is underpinned by the military, or for that matter, by security forces in that country. There's something to be said for this notion of being sovereign. And sovereign meaning the sole dispensation or the sole dispenser of force. Governments, or for that matter, whoever is in charge, claim the legal right to dispense force. And they claim that right only in a self-justifying way. It's not cosmic, it's not endowed by God. They claim it because they have the power to claim it. There was no more magic to it than that. We can do it, and so we do it. We have the force. If you want to step to us, we will put you down. And in this very specific case, the other challengers, let's say to the throne, either were absorbed or destroyed. That's kind of the way it is. So Congress, who is basically undergirded by this military and undergirded by this investigative force, and is enwrapped or surrounded by this notion that there is a sole dispensation of force in the government to which they serve, the House of Representatives is threatened and it closes down. And I think, what message does that send? Think about what I'm saying for the moment. The House of Representatives, the United States government, the House of Representatives, one of the branches of government, is threatened by a right-wing militia, and the response is to basically turn tail and close down. I got to be honest. I don't care if I had 1 million cops surrounding that building. I don't care if there were snipers in every window. I don't care. I would not be shutting down. The message that this sends, that you're willing to basically close down because a right-wing militia threatened to attack. The attack could be credible. The threats could be credible. That doesn't matter. You should not be shutting down Congress. The message that this sends is horrendous. It shows that not only were you touched on January 6th, but you're also malleable from the standpoint of threats and attacks. If you needed to build a fortress around yourself, then you should have built a fortress around yourself, but you should have continued to go into Congress. It's a bad look. That's all. It's a horrendous look to shut down as a result of something like this. And I get that January 6th was traumatic, absolutely. But that's more of a reason to get back on the horse. That's more of a reason to ensure that your area and your city is protected. And honestly, with the investigations and everything that's taking place in Congress, yeah, these guys are going to be a little bit more jittery. They're going to be a little bit more gun shy. And they may be less likely or more likely to do something like this as a result of threats. It's unclear how credible the threats were. But whatever the threats were, you should have had sufficient force there to meet it, not to run. I don't like the running. I don't like the cowardly stuff. If you're going to be a sovereign power, be a sovereign power. And this idea that you're going to get threats and all of a sudden run away because of those threats, that does not bespeak of a sovereign power. In fact, it bespeaks of people who are terrified. And I'm making the point to you that you can't do that. That's all. I look, I don't want to be too much of a hard ass on this, but I don't necessarily like the look that it gives. That's all. It's a bad look. The poor, that is paid to police the other poor, bad intentions, and having a certain penchant of domination. Well, set the dogs loose. Let them be dominant in regards to trying to make sure and lock down D.C. Ending sessions, giving way, capitulating to the fascists. No, that should not be done. Like, share,